On August 5th, 2024, David Gates finalized the most peculiar purchase of his life. It wasn't a luxury car, a rare artifact, or even a piece of cutting-edge technology. It was a piece of cable, a thick, weathered bundle of thousands of copper wires. For most, its real-world value hovered around $20, maybe $30 if copper prices surged. But to David, it was worth the $20,000 he had paid, a figure so absurd it made his stomach churn every time he thought about it. Yet, as absurd as it was, it also felt like a bargain, too good to be true. This cable, David knew, had a history. For 2 decades, it had been the neural spine of America's largest bank, carrying trillions of dollars in transactions every single day. By his calculations, this humble cable had facilitated the transfer of nearly $750 trillion during its operational life. And while most people would see a piece of old wiring, David saw the culmination of a decade's obsession, and a theory so fringe it bordered on lunacy. David's fascination with what he called material memory began 10 years ago at MIT. Back then, it was just a side note in a peer's research paper, a quirky observation about how conductive materials like copper seemed to remember the electromagnetic patterns they had been exposed to over long periods. Most dismissed the idea as a scientific curiosity with no practical application. But David couldn't let it go. He had quietly stolen the idea, building his entire postgraduate career around it. The theory was elegant in its simplicity. Prolonged exposure to specific electromagnetic and electrical patterns could subtly align the particles in a conductive material. The effect was minuscule but measurable, a fingerprint left behind by the current. But David's hypothesis went further. He believed that under the right conditions, this alignment could have tangible effects on the signals passing through the material, possibly even triggering quantum-level changes. What if, he thought, the trillions of dollars moving through that cable had imprinted some kind of residue, a financial ghost haunting the copper? For years, David hunted for a piece of cable with the right pedigree. It wasn't easy. Most of the old wiring used in financial institutions had been replaced with fiber optics and either recycled or destroyed. After an exhaustive search and careful cultivation of contacts, he finally found his prize. A contractor working on the bank's infrastructure had agreed to sell him a segment of the cable under the pretense of preserving a piece of technological history. It was a lie, of course. David's intentions were far less noble. Back in his tiny apartment, David had built a makeshift lab. The centerpiece was a modified old-school modem that connected to the cable. Each strand of copper was wired into a meticulously crafted circuit that amplified and monitored the signals passing through it. He had even created a custom electromagnetic field generator to boost the alignment process. The setup looked like something out of a mad scientist's lair, all blinking lights and ominous hums. For 4 years, he had been running small experiments, preparing for this moment. The experiment itself was straightforward. David had opened hundreds of small bank accounts at the same institution where the cable had once lived. Each account had a modest balance, and his custom program automated transfers of a single dollar between them, routing every transaction through the cable. Day 1 yielded nothing. Every transfer was perfectly balanced. $1 sent, $1 received. Disappointed but not surprised, David went to bed that night and dreamed of rivers carving through stone. Day 2 was different. By mid-afternoon, as he checked the balances of his accounts, his heart stopped. The 33rd account showed a deposit of $100 million. For a moment, he thought it was a glitch, a database error. But when he dug into the metadata of the transaction, he found something even more unsettling. It was pristine, hard-coded into the bank's system as though it had always been there. David's hands trembled as he stared at the screen. He should have stopped. A sane man would have stopped. But curiosity, that ancient and insatiable demon, gnawed at him. On day 3, he increased the transfer amounts to $10. The results were immediate and staggering. By the 50th account, a deposit of $1 billion appeared. But this time, there was something else. In the description field, buried among the usual transaction codes, was a message: "Stop stealing resources from our dimension." David's blood ran cold. He stared at the words, blinking as though they might vanish if he looked hard enough. They didn't. His eyes darted to the copper cable coiled on his desk, its frayed ends now pulsing faintly in the dim light. He hadn't installed any illumination on the device, yet it glowed, a dull, otherworldly amber. Disconnecting his computer in a panic, David paced the room, trying to rationalize what he had seen. Quantum interference? A prank? Some bizarre artifact of electromagnetic noise? But deep down, he knew better. Something had reached back, something aware, something angry. That night, the dreams returned, but they weren't of rivers. Instead, he saw an endless web of copper threads stretching into infinity, each strand vibrating with energy. Voices whispered from the threads, too many to discern, but one phrase echoed clearly. "Balance must be restored." David awoke to find his apartment shrouded in an oppressive silence. The hum of his equipment had stopped, the lights on his devices extinguished. The copper cable lay inert on his desk, its glow gone. When he tried to reconnect his modem, nothing happened. His computer refused to boot, but when he checked his bank accounts on his phone, they were all empty. Every dollar, every cent, gone. In their place was a single final message: "You have been warned." David sat in the dark, the weight of his obsession pressing down on him. The cable, now nothing more than a lifeless coil of metal, seemed to mock him. He had sought to unravel the mysteries of material memory, to bend it to his will. Instead, he had touched something far older and more complex than he could comprehend, and it had touched him back.